the Republic shall be reorganized into the first Napoleonic Empire for a safe and secure Europe. Hey there, guys. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that skit at the beginning there. We are back with the Napoleonic Wars Part 2 by OverSimplified. My voice is a little rough after the first part. We'll see how much I talk in the second part. I know I was able to talk more in that first part because there was more emphasis on the beginning and his rise to power, which I would say I personally know more about than I do about this later part of the Napoleonic Wars. I know more about the revolution than I do on Napoleon's wars. Pretty much the specific details of the Napoleonic Wars that I know about come from pretty much watching the Napoleonic Wars series by Epic History TV. Because they don't really teach much on the Napoleonic Wars unless you take a specific French history class here in the United States. So, yeah. It's really not emphasized much. Even though it is extremely important to European history. I don't know why it's not emphasized more in other history classes. Like, I guess maybe because they want to... I think the main reason, though, is because they want to focus more on world history and not necessarily on Euro-centric history. Which is understandable. But, anyways, another note. Please, this video is most likely, just like with the first part, going to get copyrighted by OverSimplified. He has claimed all of my videos that I have reacted to from their channel in before. So I do not make money off of OverSimplified reactions. So you guys could please go and support my channel if you enjoy my reactions, by subscribing, even hitting the like button on this video. Even though I won't see money, it will help out the channel in the analytics. At least that's YouTube says it helps out in the analytics, but I don't fucking believe them. But you know, I gotta have hope. But I would very much appreciate it if you go watch one of my other videos. Literally by no other channel really claims my content, so just go watch a video that isn't oversimplified, and I will see some revenue from that. Depending on how many of you go check out, I may not even make much money from you checking them. But anyways, that's a whole different topic. Let's go ahead and finish up the Napoleonic Wars.
After the Third and Fourth Coalition Wars,
Smack 'em.
Napoleon had decisively defeated all three of his
Get out of my lobby.
on the
Whoops.
continent, and he was now undoubtedly the master of Europe. After the Battle of Friedland,
Not the god
his
of
enemies
Europe,
sued
not
for
yet.
peace, and they all met on a raft on a river.
Oh yes, he's gonna talk about
They
Tilsit.
had been fighting for the past 4 years, but now Napoleon
They were
and
best
Alexander
friends.
surprisingly got along like a house on fire. They laughed together. They chatted long into the night. They kissed.
Oh.
The two had a lot of mutual
Romantic.
respect, and Napoleon even told
A
his
big
wife
hip.
that if Alexander were a woman, I would make him my mistress. Kind of a weird thing to say to your wife, Napoleon. In the end, they came to an amicable agreement.
Yeah, it is.
Russia would lose barely any land, and in return, they'd join France against the UK, and
Russia had those islands down there in Greece? What the fuck? I didn't know that.
invade Sweden. Win-win. On the other hand, Frederick William III was
Adidas.
sidelined, and Prussia lost an enormous amount of territory to French client states. Only the UK remained as the last major threat to Napoleon, and they continued to be a big thorn in his side, constantly
Ooh.
funding his enemies and using their powerful navy to wreak havoc on French trade and overseas colonies. But what could Napoleon do? The British were safe across the channel. Well, he said, if I can't fight you with guns, I'll fight you with money. Earlier in 1806, Napoleon had
boxing
announced
gloves.
the continental system, a total shutoff of the UK
Yes.
from continental trade. No one in Europe
And it only worked to so long as everyone fucking was in on the system. And that means if even one person was not in on the system, the whole system failed. So it's not a good system.
was to trade with Britain, and Napoleon hoped that by hitting their economy, he could force them to negotiate. The British economy did take a hit, and they responded in their typical fashion by going to Copenhagen and blowing a bunch of stuff up.
Wait,
But in general,
they did that twice? What the fuck, Britain? God, Do the Danes have any animosity towards the British for doing that shit?
In general, the British managed to stay afloat by simply increasing their trade with other parts of the world. Many neutral countries found themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place as the two European superpowers
USA.
demanded they cease trade with the enemy. Hey America, you better not trade with the French or else I'll come burn down the White House. What? This is gonna wreck my economy. I need to start saving money. How the heck am I gonna start saving money? Yeah, that's right, yeah. Making peace with the Russians, a continental blockade, and blowing up Copenhagen. Sick of being blown up for doing almost nothing, and under significant pressure from Napoleon, the Danish officially sided with France.
Nice.
But Napoleon's blockade had the biggest effect on continental Europe, who were now cut off from a major trading partner, one that controlled the seas and held a rich, growing empire. And a lot of countries didn't fully comply.
Yep.
Portugal, a traditional British ally, refused to take part. No problem. Napoleon sent an army and invaded. But it wasn't just Portugal. Many of Napoleon's allies were also suspect. Your Majesty, it seems that Spain isn't properly enforcing your blockade. Spain? Why not? Well, it appears they've been trying to find a way out of being your ally since they lost their fleet at Trafalgar.
Oh.
What is with these people? It's almost like everyone's only pretending to be my ally because they know otherwise I'd beat them up. Do I even have any real friends? Are you my friend, Pierre? Say yes or I'll slap you. Napoleon had come to mistrust his ally to the south.
You're my best friend,
and in
Napoleon.
particular, Napoleon thought the Spanish royal family were an incompetent mess.
Which they were.
Carlos, you've got to get it together. How can I trust you when all you do is go hunting? Meanwhile, you let this ambitious nobody who dislikes me run the country. And you seem to be the only person in the universe who doesn't realize he's boinking your wife. And what's worse... Who the heck are you? I'm the king's son. I just overthrew my dad.
Oh.
So, actually, now I'm the king. You people are the biggest cluster of shameless, narcissistic idiots and all around just the worst people I've ever met. Here, have a Kid's Choice Award. French forces, many having conveniently
what's the Kid's
already
Choice Award
entered
got to do
Spain
with
to
this?
invade Portugal, occupied Spanish forts, and Napoleon invited the Spanish royals to France to help mediate their differences.
Oh God. Dr. Bonaparte.
We're here with the royal family of Spain. So, Fernando, you've been accused of plotting against your father and vying for the Spanish throne. What do you have to say for
Gasp.
yourself? Well, Napoleon,
It's all true.
Great. Well, I've got the test results right here. Fernando, in the case of the Spanish throne, you are not the king.
The gasp.
And Carlos, you are also
Not the king. Even bigger gasp.
I'm the king!
What a
Actually,
twist!
Napoleon made his brother the king, but for all intents and purposes, Spain was now his puppet. He expected the Spanish people to be over the moon at the removal
Behold
of their
your
unpopular
new
royal
king.
family. Imagine his surprise when it turned out that people don't
Didn't
really
like
to be
him. They don't like the
subjugated by a
French.
foreign power, least of all one who had previously attacked the Catholic Church.
Oh,
And so the
100%.
people
They
of
would not
Spain
like that.
revolted. Brutal fighting broke out as bands of armed Spaniards ambushed
Oh,
French
jeez.
troops across the kingdom, and vicious atrocities were committed on both sides. In addition to fighting the regular Spanish and Portuguese forces, the French had to contend with tens of thousands of guerrilla fighters throughout the Spanish countryside. The British even took the opportunity to land an army led by the future Duke of Wellington. And now,
Arthur
British
Wellesley.
forces were defeating French ones on land. Napoleon briefly went to Spain in person, and he did drive back the Allied armies, but before
Oh,
long, his
mad lad.
attention was needed elsewhere. The whole thing became a nightmare for the emperor. He excelled at traditional warfare, but this was something more akin to Napoleon's Vietnam. The whole conflict
Yeah.
would keep hundreds of thousands of French soldiers and resources bogged down for
1807 to
years.
14,
Napoleon was
damn.
never able to break the will of the Spanish people, and this problem weakened his position in Europe.
Oh no.
Hey, Francis, want to go to war with Napoleon again? Oh, I don't know, Britain. He's already whomped me 3 times. I'll give you a bazillion pounds.
Oh my God.
Well, okay. Seeing that Napoleon was now caught up in Spain, and with some British funding, Austria decided maybe, just maybe, this time, they'd have a chance.
Or the Fifth
So did they?
Coalition.
No. Napoleon defeated them in just 4 months.
Oh my
It was
God,
quick, but it
Charles.
wasn't exactly
Charles,
easy.
no.
The Austrians had been watching Napoleon and learning, and they had made some reforms. While Napoleon, after years of war, was increasingly having to rely on inexperienced conscripts. So this time, the Austrians gave him a run for his money. The Fifth Coalition saw some of the bloodiest battles to date, including Napoleon's first major defeat. And when he did finally defeat the Austrians at the Battle of Wagram, it was a very costly victory.
Oh my God,
Still,
yeah.
Napoleon had yet again kicked Francis's butt, and as part of the peace terms, Austria lost a bunch more land. Not long after, however, Napoleon and Francis came to another agreement. It was decided that Napoleon would marry Francis's young daughter. But wait, doesn't Napoleon already have a wife? Well, yes, he did. Josephine and Napoleon had become quite fond of one another, but now that Napoleon was playing the monarch game, he needed a male heir, and his aging wife wasn't giving him one. So it was out with the old and in with the new. At least he didn't behead anyone. For Austria, they felt that if Napoleon was going to keep on winning, they may as well be on his side. So through the marriage, Napoleon got an alliance with Austria and a beautiful baby potato. Between the failing blockade against Britain, the ongoing war in Spain, and now his recent struggles in Austria, cracks in Napoleon's invincibility were beginning to show. But still, look at this map. So blue, so beautiful. Even Sweden, after being pulverized by Russia, overthrew their king, and after an interesting chain of events, ended up putting one of Napoleon's own marshals in charge. Marshal Bernadotte took the name Karl Johan and became Crown Prince of Sweden, after agreeing to join Napoleon's continental system. For now, Sweden was Team France. Napoleon was on top of the world. He had won an endless string of victories. All he had to do now was sit back and not make any major miscalculations that could completely turn the tide of war. So let's see what comes next.
Yeah, what comes next? Oh, nice.
France's alliance with Russia was a terrifying prospect. Together, the two could have been unstoppable. But unfortunately, the alliance
Napoleon was too egomaniac.
The Russians felt they weren't getting a fair deal. Napoleon's Duchy of Warsaw right on their doorstep was a bit of an insult. And then their economy began to tank because of Napoleon's British blockade. And eventually, they began to open up trade. Your Majesty, it seems Alexander is no longer abiding by the continental system and has begun trading with the British. Alexander? But he kissed me. Kissed you? You wouldn't get it, Pierre. No one would ever kiss you. The security of Napoleon's
I feel for you, Napoleon. I feel for you.
Empire depended on removing the British threat, and he wasn't happy with Russia's backdoor shenanigans. And so in 1812, Napoleon decided to go to war. He gathered together the most massive army Europe had ever seen, made up of troops from every corner of his empire.
650,000 men.
To invade.
Fucking hell.
It looks like Napoleon's coming for us. Generals, I need ideas. We could stand and fight. No, that's stupid.
Yeah, that's
You're stupid. We could run away. You.
Genius.
You're a star. You'll remember Napoleon's tactics relied on astonishing speed to outmaneuver his enemy and force a quick, decisive battle. Well, I've got two words for you. Scorched earth. If his opponent retreated while scorching the earth, his men couldn't live off the land. And if his men couldn't live off the land, he needed his supply trains. And if he needed his supply trains, he couldn't move quickly. And if he couldn't move quickly, he couldn't outmaneuver his enemy. And if he couldn't outmaneuver his enemy, I think you get the point.
Yeah,
Napoleon launched his invasion and hoped for a quick battle. But all he could do was try to catch the retreating Russians while moving
I like how they're losing the men as they go along. That's cool.
The horribly
I like that
hot
detail.
summer devastated his army. His men died of heat, exhaustion, and disease. Supplies began to run out, and his men began to starve. Many deserted, and still the Russians continued to retreat. Numerous times, Napoleon considered turning back, but that little voice in his head kept on telling him, keep going.
What's with this?
Just a little further.
Spaghetti.
And don't worry, you're definitely average height.
You're definitely.
Time. He nearly caught the Russians at Smolensk, but it was his birthday, so he had a party instead.
Woo!
When he finally
reached
love parties.
Moscow,
he predicted the Russians wouldn't be willing to give up such a historic and holy city without a fight, and he was right. The Russians finally turned to face him for the single deadliest day of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Borodino.
Hey, we watched that video
valiantly, and as he got older, Napoleon's battle tactics seemed to become a little less refined and a little more run straight at the enemy, try not to die. He launched a full frontal assault at the Russian defenses, and as a result, the death toll was colossal. The Russians eventually decided to retreat, leaving Moscow to fall into Napoleon's hands. Quick, the French are taking the city. Release all these prisoners immediately and tell them to burn it to the ground. Well, well, Jimmy the arsonist, you are not going to believe your luck. Moscow went up in flames, and as Napoleon entered, it became very clear his army wouldn't be able to stay there very long. But he had just defeated the Russian army and taken their most beloved city. In his mind, he had won. So he sent Tsar Alexander in St. Petersburg a letter. Your Imperial Majesty, Napoleon requests your surrender. How shall I respond? You shan't, Dmitri. Ever?
You shan't.
Ever. But, Your Majesty, it will be winter soon. The French forces are stuck 500 miles into Russian territory with dwindling supplies. If we don't say anything, well, then they'll all die. After waiting for a response for about a month, the first snow of winter began to fall, and Napoleon sensed the catastrophe that was about to unfold. He decided their only choice now was to get out. And that's
Yeah.
when it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. His
Ooh,
glorious
real
invasion
stupid
had
cold.
just become a race for survival. As the Russians realized the French were fleeing for their lives, they began to close in on their supply line. Men froze to death. Their horses as well. There was starvation and disease. The injured and
Mass
dying could only be
starvation.
left by the side of the road, as it was too slow to try to carry them. And all along the way, the dreaded Russian Cossacks stalked the bleeding French army, and every now and then swept in for a quick attack. Napoleon, fearing capture, kept
I
a
love the
vial of
horse's
poison
eyes
around his
just
neck.
going,
At one point, the Russian armies nearly trapped him against the Berezina River, but a little Napoleon cleverness gave him the old Geoffrey Juke, tricking them into thinking he was going south and then escaping across rapidly built pontoon bridges to the north. When the Russians
Absolute
realized
mad bad.
where he was and began to close in, the French burned the bridges before everyone could cross.
Oh.
Hundreds drowned, and thousands were captured. At this
That's not
point,
good.
Napoleon got wind of plots against him forming in Paris, so he abandoned his men and went back to France.
Oh.
The remaining French stragglers made it across
Napoleon, what's with you abandoning your men, goddammit? And why do they still fucking follow him? He's abandoned his men like twice.
the border. It's been estimated over 600,000 men went into Russia. Less than 100,000 returned.
Yep.
Napoleon was now in a very precarious situation. His army had just been obliterated, and the other European
Absolutely
leaders
shredded.
smelled blood. Here was an opportunity
Sniff,
to
sniff.
take advantage of a weakened Napoleon, regain territory and influence, and liberate Europe from his dirty French paws. And so,
Dirty
they began to turn.
paws.
Prussia soon broke their alliance and switched sides, while Austria declared neutrality. Even Sweden, led by one of Napoleon's old marshals, joined the Allies, partly due to Napoleon's earlier invasion of Swedish Pomerania. The War of the Sixth Coalition had begun.
Dun dun
The
dun.
coalition forces had been reforming their armies, and they were now much better. And the UK had also significantly amped up its financial aid
We want
to
some
its
money.
continental allies. Their armies quickly advanced through Poland and into Germany. In Paris, Napoleon was understandably freaking out. He needed to put together a new army fast, and he called up over 100,000 new conscripts, mostly teenagers. He also
What's the
put his
Wi-Fi
factories
password?
into overdrive, and he was like, "You make more rifles.
Oh.
You build new cannons. You make more horses. I don't make horses. Then who makes horses? Horses make horses.
Horses.
Explain how. Well, when a daddy horse and a mommy horse love each other very much.
No.
Yes. Go on. Well, then the daddy
Keep
horse.
going.
I'm sorry, Napoleon. You're 43. I thought you'd know this stuff. Don't touch me. I'm gonna be sick. As it turned out, Napoleon's lack of horses
God
would take
damn
the
it.
biggest toll on his army, since his tactics relied on speed, maneuverability, and destruction. When he took the fight to the Allies in 1813, he did defeat them and sent them running. But
Oh,
lacking
nice.
cavalry, he was unable to effectively pursue and destroy. He needed
Not nice.
horses. For the Allies, being defeated in battle by a man whose army was now full of inexperienced conscripts was concerning. So both sides were like, hold up, time out. The Allies were somewhat cornered, and had Napoleon kept going, it's possible he could have won. But instead he agreed to a brief truce with the Austrians mediating between the two sides.
It's
When
agreed that you
Austria
both
demanded
lose.
Napoleon make major concessions, Napoleon told them to shove it. Having had their terms
Family is
rejected,
so
Austria
weird.
felt now they were justified in saying, well, we tried, and they joined the coalition. Okay, everyone.
They try.
Look at us.
That's
The
what's
boys are
important. As
back
long as you
together.
try.
But Napoleon is still dangerous, so we need a plan. Any ideas? Ooh, I know. No, forget it. That's stupid. Oh, no.
No. Yeah.
I've got it.
You got it.
When he approaches,
Approaches? Yeah.
we run away.
Whoa.
Genius.
Mind
He's a
blown.
genius. The plan was as
Absolute
follows.
fucking
Wherever Napoleon
brilliant,
advanced,
most smartest
whoever he
man
advanced
ever.
on would avoid battle, allowing the others to sweep in from the sides and attack the French marshals guarding his flanks. Essentially, the plan was, don't try to fight Napoleon. And this plan worked tremendous.
I feel like Bernadotte should be able to counter Napoleon, though. He was one of his marshals. He should know his shit.
The Allies scored a number of victories that saw Napoleon move back to the city of Leipzig, where he would make one last major stand as the Allied armies converged in on him from all sides. The stage
Dun dun
was set
dun.
for the biggest and bloodiest battle of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle
Of Leipzig.
Almost 500,000 troops from over a dozen nations stretched across the
500,000.
battlefield.
Wow.
The French found themselves fighting on all sides for 4 days against the Austrians, Prussians, Swedes, and Russians. It's no wonder this battle is also sometimes referred to as the Battle of the Nations. The French fought
That's more of a
but
badass
ultimately
name.
were no match for the coordinated
What
efforts
are
of the coalition.
what are the French doing here? They're like fighting no one.
At one point, in the midst of battle, Saxon troops allied with the French had a team huddle and were like, hey guys, I'm pretty sure the French are losing. Let's switch sides. And so they did. When it became clear that Napoleon couldn't win, he ordered a retreat across the only bridge over the river. The Allies swarmed into the city, and desperate fighting raged in the streets. Okay, Corporal, after everyone has crossed the river, I need you to blow up the bridge. Okay? Not before everyone's crossed.
Blow up the bridge now.
After. You got that? Yes, Colonel. I'm not 5. I can comprehend time. Good. Wait. Did he say before or after? Well, fortune favors the bold. The bridge was blown early, and 30,000 French troops were stranded and captured.
Wow.
A disaster.
That's a fucking
And with
lot.
that, the dominoes were beginning to come crashing down on Napoleon. In the south, an army under the British Duke of Wellington had been pushing the French out of Spain for the past few years, and were now crossing into France. Austrian armies had pushed into Italy, while Napoleon's old flamboyant cavalry commander, Murat, who Napoleon had made king of Naples, decided to switch sides.
Oh.
German states, many
Everyone's
resentful
just switching
after
sides
years
on
under
him.
Napoleon's thumb, turned against him, and the Confederation
for
of the
Denmark.
Rhine collapsed. Bernadotte invaded Denmark, and they were
Never
forced
mind.
to join the coalition, while the Netherlands were liberated. You'd think Napoleon might have seen
You're
the writing
screwed.
on the wall, but he was Napoleon, and so instead, he prepared to keep fighting. As attitudes in Paris were already beginning to turn against him, he called up more conscripts to defend the exhausted nation. As for the Allies, they weren't sure exactly what they were aiming for here. A few peace offers were floated that may have let Napoleon keep his position, but the British kept throwing around even more money, and eventually, they all agreed that the ultimate aim was the deposition of Napoleon entirely. And so, Napoleon embarked on one of his most famous campaigns to defend the homeland. He was completely outnumbered, but the Allied armies had split up and spread out.
Oh no.
His army was so small that he could move at lightning speed, and he used this to his advantage.
Nice.
In the famous 6 Days campaign against Prussian General Blücher, he attacked from all directions and defeated Blücher's forces 4 times, only suffering
Nice.
1/10 of the casualties he
Wow.
inflicted.
Okay. Hold on, that's impressive. That is that's really fucking impressive.
Even with his back completely to the wall, Napoleon was still Napoleon. Then he turned south to take on Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia and enjoyed even more victories. However, Napoleon's problem was that he couldn't be everywhere at once, and wherever he wasn't, the Allies continued to push towards Paris. He made one last-ditch attempt at moving in behind the enemy lines and cutting off their communications, but Paris was in disarray, and the people were sick of war. One ambitious and slightly treacherous politician sent the Allied armies a letter basically saying, hey guys, come on in. And so, they did. The city's defenders surrendered, and as the Allied leaders entered Paris, the people cheered them as bringers of peace. Paris had fallen. Quick, marshals, gather your men. We're gonna launch an assault on Paris. Where are my marshals? They all left and told me to give you this note.
Bruh.
Napoleon's marshals had realized what he hadn't. It was over, and they insisted all that was left now, for the good of France, was for him to abdicate. And without the support of his army, Napoleon had no choice. He hoped his son could take his place, but it was decided instead to restore the old Bourbon monarchy. Old King Louis XVI's brother would become the King of France. It was almost like the French Revolution had never even happened.
We chopped
But
all
what
those
will we
heads for
do with
this?
Napoleon? We can't have a hyperactive 44-year-old menace running around reigniting revolutionary ideals and plotting his return. Well, why don't we send him, I don't know, there. The location
island,
chosen for Napoleon's exile was the small island of Elba, just off the coast of Italy. Napoleon was to rule over the island, and even got to keep the title Emperor of Elba. The Allies must have been in stitches when they came up with that. When he learned what his fate was to be, he drank the poison he had been keeping around his neck. But it had gone out of date, so instead of a quick and painless death, he got a painful stummy-wummy instead.
Oh no, not the
Before he left
stummy-wummy.
France, he addressed his oldest and closest guard one last time.
been
making
emotional,
an emotional
guys.
speech that ended with him kissing their flag. And
Oh.
off he went
And he
to
gave it
exile.
the tongue too. Nice.
The deal that was given to him was actually quite generous. His family were given titles, he was to receive a state pension from France, and he was able to receive many distinguished visitors, all eager to come and meet the famed emperor. And he ruled over Elba well, improving infrastructure and introducing many legal and social reforms aimed at improving life on the island. Hey Napoleon, just coming in to check on how it's all going. Holy smokes! But it wasn't all good. For one thing, he learned of the death of his first wife Josephine and was deeply saddened. He was forbidden from seeing his son and current wife, and in Austria, Emperor Francis had ordered a local count to seduce her, so she would forget about Napoleon. Then, the new King Louis XVIII refused to give Napoleon his agreed pension. He was under constant threat of assassination, and there were even rumors that the Allies were thinking of relocating him somewhere even more remote. But the biggest problem was that Napoleon...
That's really cool. I didn't know any of that. I'm glad he put that in. I had no clue about that stuff.
Was once the master of Europe. He had lived a thrilling life of adventure, fame, and glory. Now, he found himself on a tiny island in the Mediterranean, and he was bored. Wouldn't it be nice if he could somehow return to France and reclaim his throne? Hey, Napoleon, want to go back to France and reclaim your throne? I would, Pierre. But how? Well, I was thinking we could just take this boat.
What a mad lad, Pierre. Pierre's the real homie.
Yes. Pierre, remember when I told you no one would ever kiss you? Yes, sire. Well, pucker up, boy. Yay. When Napoleon left Elba, it wasn't really the daring escape you might think. He basically had kind of a leaving ceremony, hopped on a ship, and sailed back to France. He brought with him an army of about 1,000 men, and he began his journey to Paris. However, in Paris, there was now a new king, and at first, the people largely accepted him because the last few years of war under Napoleon had brought immense death and economic suffering. That's right, the king is back,
baby!
Divine right to rule. Don't worry, everyone. I know the economy is kaput, but I and my courtiers will withdraw into this palace, and we will definitely work as hard as we can to fix everything.
Yeah! It's party!
Oh yeah, that's why we got rid of the king. As the Bourbon monarchy began to look more and more like a return to the past, and the returning nobility seemed hell-bent on regaining their lost
This is my land, give it back!
The people weren't too happy. And so, Napoleon hoped that his glorious return would be met with jubilation. In the end, the reaction was a little mixed, but many were happy to see their old emperor. Your Majesty, it seems that Napoleon is back and marching this way with 1,000 men. That guy? No problem. I have hundreds of thousands of men. Send them to arrest him. Your Majesty, it seems the thousands of men we sent to arrest Napoleon have all joined his side. Well, I'm off to Belgium. If you ever need a king again, be sure to let me know. As Napoleon continued his journey, the king had sent battalions of men to stop him, but they largely comprised of Napoleon's old soldiers, many unhappy with King Louis's military reforms. And so, when ordered to arrest him, they simply couldn't do it. In one famous incident, the troops began to cry out, "Long live the Emperor." When Napoleon reached Paris,
Vive
with King Louis having fled, he entered unopposed to reclaim his throne. Napoleon was back from the dead.
He's back,
everyone,
baby!
Now that we've finally gotten rid of that guy, let's try to make sure something like this can never happen again.
Sir, it happened again.
What's that doing there? Hey, fellow monarchs.
My pants again!
This time, Napoleon promised he would be a mucho good boy and not start any wars. But the Allied leaders were having none of it. They declared Napoleon an outlaw, and the
Wanted, Napoleon Bonaparte. Have you seen this man? He's both short in temper and height. Will claim that he's average height for the time, but he's not to be believed. Likes treats and will only bite if provoked. No, he might bite if not provoked,
the illegitimate ruler of France. Then they declared war, not on France,
oh my God,
but on Napoleon himself.
That's
and when
so many
multiple
people.
empires declaring war on you as an individual, that's how you know you're a very naughty boy. The Allied powers began making plans to combine their forces and once again invade France. The most immediate threat to Napoleon were the British and Prussians hanging out in nearby Belgium. If Napoleon could knock them out quickly, maybe he could force the Allies to negotiate, and maybe he could hold on to his power. Together, the two armies to the north outnumbered him, so he made a plan to divide them and take them on separately. Historians debate how much of a chance Napoleon had here, but this same strategy of dividing and conquering had worked for him multiple times.
Yes.
He marched north with 125,000 men and took on the Allies in a number of initial engagements.
But another thing to remember is that it did work before, but now his enemies know his strategies now, and so they know what to avoid, I would say.
Defeating the Prussians before turning to take on the British. But to Napoleon's dismay, miscommunication and hesitation among his marshals allowed both enemy armies to retreat.
And
crucially, rather than fleeing east, the Prussians moved north, where they could remain in contact with the British. Napoleon sent a force to hold off the Prussians as he moved in on the British, now holding a defensive position at Waterloo. Prussian General Blücher sent word that he would come to Wellington's aid if he could just hold off the French for long enough. Napoleon had to defeat Wellington before the Prussian army could arrive in force, and it was close. The
Really?
British held the high ground.
Let's hear
and
how
a number
close
of
it
key
was.
defensive buildings across the battlefield. After waiting some hours he didn't have for the ground to dry, Napoleon sent men to assault the Hougoumont farm, but the British-German garrison there
I just
held
love how
out.
they're
French
swinging their
Marshal Ney
guns.
launched a number of miscalculated cavalry charges at the British lines. The British formed defensive square formations, and they tore the French cavalry to shreds, while one guy chose the absolute worst time to go on a bender. The French did manage to capture a farmhouse directly in front of the British line, and from there, they unleashed artillery hellfire on the British square formations. And as Napoleon sent his Imperial Guard in to finish the British off, a nervous Wellington knew his lines were at breaking point. But the Prussians had earlier begun to arrive, and now they were arriving in large numbers. And after the British held out and sent the French Imperial Guard running, the French lines panicked, fearing they had been encircled, and they began to flee. The Battle of Waterloo was an Allied victory.
Woo!
And with that, Napoleon's hopes of returning to glory were vanquished. He knew
Yeah.
he was defeated. He went to
Again.
the British and said, "Can I please have a house near London?" And the British replied, "No." Instead, to make sure Napoleon was put away once and for all, they sent him to one of the most isolated and remote places they could think of, a tiny island in the Atlantic Ocean,
Yep.
St. Helena.
Helena.
Here, a deeply isolated and depressed Emperor Napoleon would live the remaining years of his life. His house was a wooden bungalow, not exactly
Huh.
on par with the Tuileries Palace.
No.
Much to his frustration, his captors referred to him as General, rather than calling him Emperor. His mail was censored, his visitors were vetted. There was almost no way he could escape such an isolated island. But just to be sure, he was guarded by 2,000 British soldiers
Oh my God.
and 2 ships that circled the island 24 hours a day.
Really?
He had once been the most
That's
powerful
fucking
man
crazy.
alive. And images of the victorious Napoleon depict a strong leader, hand firmly in jacket. Depictions of Napoleon on St. Helena show a disheveled old man, hand firmly in pants. He had lost
As you
everything.
do.
And by the way, he was only 46. So maybe it's about time you know what? You're doing all right, kid.
Yeah, that's what I
Napoleon fought one
thought.
last battle while
Oversimplified.
on
That's
the
what I
island.
thought.
The battle for his reputation. He spent hours writing his memoirs, espousing his achievements, recording his greatness, and turning himself and his story into a phenomenal legend. And in this battle, he certainly succeeded. His mark on history cannot be denied. After his defeat, the European monarchs had got to work restoring Europe to its traditional balance and reasserting
Yeah,
their
here comes the
dominance.
concert
But
of
after Napoleon had
Europe.
spread the influence
I don't know why it blacked out like that. Concert of Europe, otherwise known as Council of Vienna, where they would meet to talk about the balance of power in Europe.
of the French Revolution, these returning monarchs would have a difficult time regaining
I don't
their
know why
absolute
it
control.
lowered in quality.
France returned to the rule of the Bourbons, but it would go on to stage another revolution, and then another one.
Yep,
Reaction to
as you do.
Napoleon's
It's
rule
France.
in places like Germany and Italy propelled forward the ideas and feelings of modern unity and nationalism, and his
I think I know what his next topic is going to be.
Napoleonic Code still remains the basis of law in various
I
modern
wonder what his
countries.
next video is going
The
to be
modern
on.
world owes a lot to Napoleon's legacy. He remains statistically possibly the greatest military general in history, and
Based on Ethan Art's war scores, Alexander the Great is number 10, Georgy Zhukov, number 9, Frederick the Great 8th, Ulysses S. Grant, number 7, Hannibal Barca, 6, Khalid ibn al-Walid, number 5, Takeda Shingen, number 4, the Duke of Wellington is 3, 2, Julius Caesar, and 1, Napoleon Bonaparte. I wonder exactly how they figured this number out.
his revolutionary military tactics changed the face of warfare.
Intuitive understanding of the battlefield, good use of intelligence, strike at enemy lines of communications, enemies were often dum-dums, a pinch of luck, and more. I would say probably a little bit more than a pinch of luck.
He was the last truly great leader to both lead his armies in battle while retaining total political control over a vast empire. There's
Yeah,
still
true.
hope for Joe Biden. But the man remains somewhat
Wait,
of an
whoa.
animal over a vast empire. There's still hope for Joe Biden.
Oh my fucking god. I love it.
But the man remains
love
somewhat
it.
of an enigma, and we still aren't sure exactly what to make of him in some regards. Was he the champion of the French Revolution, spreading equality wherever he went, or did he betray it by making himself an absolute monarch and restricting certain liberties? Was he an ambitious and aggressive conqueror, hell-bent
Yes.
on bringing Europe to its knees? Or was he
100%.
simply defending himself against an aggressive Europe, hell-bent
That
on
too.
reducing
I mean, There's like I would say, like you could argue. Honestly, I look at it more as at the beginning it was defensive, and then as it dragged on and on, Napoleon became more and more aggressive and more, I guess, egotistical.
Using his power, some things will continue to be debated. Napoleon died at the age of 51, officially of stomach cancer, but some believe he may have been poisoned. The British
He was
buried
probably
him
poisoned.
in a tin coffin, inside a mahogany coffin, inside a lead coffin, inside another mahogany coffin.
Jesus.
I guess this time, they wanted to make sure he stayed where they put him. In 1840, his remains were moved to Paris, where they now rest under the dome of Les Invalides. The man from humble origins, with huge ambition, ruthless determination, immaculate skill on the battlefield, and a hefty dose of luck, who was determined to make his mark on history, did just that. There is no immortality, he said, but the memory that is left in the minds of men. And in that sense, Napoleon knew he would live on forever.
True.
Oh, and to reiterate, he was definitely average height for the time.
God damn it. Oh, what's next? Oh, they're not gonna say what's next, are they? Let's see. Damn it. No. I want that fucking Joe Biden fucking thing. That was so funny. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Joe Biden. God damn it, I can't find it. No. 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 Now goes Napoleon on the Alps. Yeah, this was good. I would say part 2 was a little bit weaker than part 1. I do like the ending note that he did. I think that was really well said. These last couple minutes were really well written. But this part 2, I think, was a little bit weaker than part 1. Part 1, again, I think OverSimplified has this trend when he does these two-parters, where part 1 has a butt ton of information and stuff, and pretty much has all of the context information that you need for the story for the topic that he's wanting to cover. And then part 2 is more of, here's what happened. You already know the information from part 1, so now I'm just going to tell what happened. And then in his last 2 minutes, he talks, then he puts on, you know, more of a serious note and talks about stuff like that as he did here. And I think that's well done. It works for him. Not necessarily my style. I mean, I can see it. It's just not. I just prefer part 1 over part 2 because of that additional context and the additional information that was present in part 1. But you know, it's OverSimplified. He always makes good content. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.